Hi, everyone, and welcome to UX Insiders. This is a series of live webinars hosted by us, the UX Design Institute, to give you an insight into what it's like to work in the UX industry. The UX Design Institute is the gold standard in UX education. So if you're looking to brush up your knowledge and you're not already one of our students, be sure to check out our courses. The link to our website will be in the chat box momentarily, so keep an eye out for that. We have a really exciting topic for you today, but before I introduce this evening's guest speaker, I just want to explain a little bit about how you can interact with us during the webinar. So if you want to introduce yourself and tell us where you're watching from, you can do that in the chat box. You'll see that at the bottom right of your screen. We will have time for questions and answers at the end of the webinar. If you'd like to ask our speaker a question, please make sure you use the question box, so not the chat box. And we'll be looking at those questions throughout the event, and we'll pick out the most popular ones. You can actually upvote them as well. So we'll be looking at those questions and picking a few great ones to ask Mitchell towards the end of the event. So with all of that, I would like to officially welcome our guest. This evening, we are really lucky to be joined by Mitchell. Is it Clement? I don't want to say your last name incorrectly.
Mitchell Clements.
Clements.
Yes.
I have French people in the family, so that's my pronunciation.
No worries.
Mitchell is a senior product design manager at Simple Nexus, and Mitchell is going to talk to us all about portfolio do's and don'ts, a really great topic for this audience. And he's going to be providing us with the toolkit we need to craft compelling case studies. As I mentioned, he's going to do some tips and tricks first, and then we'll take the audience questions at the end of the event. So with that, Mitchell, I'm going to hand it over to you if you're ready.
Fantastic. Well, let me just go ahead and share my screen. Make sure that is working. All right, are you seeing the slide presentation?
Yes, you are good to go.
Okay, perfect. Well, we'll go ahead and just go right in. Yeah, thank you for the warm introduction. And I am super excited to talk about case studies today. This is a topic I'm really passionate about because I love storytelling. And during my career, I've had a very unique perspective from both the side of a design hiring manager, reviewing hundreds upon hundreds of case studies, but I've also been on the flip side as a career coach, where I'm helping designers write their case studies so they can stand out to hiring managers. And today, I want to share with you my new 5-level framework for identifying what level your case studies are at and how to level up to the next level, and why the designers at levels 4 through 5 are typically getting the interviews and the job offers and negotiating higher salaries. Before we jump into all this, I'll just add a few disclaimers. First off, I'll be primarily speaking to UX designers and product designers and using those terms interchangeably. But a lot of this will still apply also to UX researchers and designers in other disciplines. That is the primary audience that I'm speaking towards. And then with case studies, I'll primarily be talking about case studies that a hiring manager or recruiter reviews at the beginning of the process before extending the interview. So we're primarily talking about case studies in your portfolio where you're not in the room to explain them or show them. Rather, a hiring manager is reading them at their own time. So with that being said, there's been a rise in headlines and articles in recent years, basically stating the portfolio case study is broken. This one came from Tobias Van Schneider, pretty much saying, let's face it, the formula for case studies has expired. This one from Joe Natoli, when asked, how do I write a good case study? His advice was, forget what you've heard, because there's a lot of advice out there, and it can be really confusing when there's conflicting advice and opinions. There was also a headline from the UX Collective when they published an article about the case study factory, basically saying every case study out there looks and reads the same. And this is super ironic because in the field of design, We celebrate and love diversity and being unique and creativity, innovation, personal style, and taste. So then why is it that we're all converging to these identical case studies as if they're coming out of a factory on an assembly line? And that's what my new 5-level framework is trying to make sense of what are the common mistakes and pitfalls in the lower levels, such as 1 and 2, and then why most designers are actually at level 3, and how to get to levels 4 and 5, where those are the majority of the designers landing the job interviews and negotiating higher salaries. So I'm going to walk you through my 5-level framework. And it starts at the bottom at level 1. This is what I call the art gallery. And it's similar to an art gallery. It often looks like a Dribble profile where there's a bunch of beautiful mock-ups and UIs. In some cases, there might be a picture of sticky notes or wireframes and then the final solution. But the problem with this art gallery approach is, as a design hiring manager, I have no idea what is going on. Basically, I just see all of these assets and these pictures and these images, but there's no context on who is the user, what is the problem that is being solved, what was the process, why was that the process, and why is this the right solution? And so at this level, a hiring manager can see evidence of visual design and maybe drawing boxes and moving sticky notes, but they're missing everything else, such as the thinking, the strategy, the research, the soft skills, opportunities for leadership and collaboration, business skills and systems thinking. Everything on the right is typically what's in a job description, in addition to visual design. And that's what a hiring manager is looking for, evidence of those skills and your potential and ability. So if you do have a level 1 case study where it's just a bunch of assets on a PDF or a website, my top recommendation would be to add context. Your assets should supplement a story. And now this leads me to level 2, which is the polar opposite of level 1. And I call this the academic report. Typically, I see these type of case studies come from students who attend a university where there's often restrictions in their work. Like a professor might say, you need to write a report and it has to be at least 10 pages. And so then students are trying to reach that 10-page mark. And the case studies often look something like this, with just these large, intimidating paragraphs of text that's going to take 10 to 20 minutes to read. And the problem with this type of approach is no one is going to read that or have time to read that. If you put yourself in the shoes of a hiring manager, now I've had experiences where I had to review 100 case studies in 2 hours. And so if you do the math, that's essentially about 1 minute per case study. And so I'm not going to be able to read through the entire thing and go in depth and understand your skills and accomplishments and achievements if it's just drowning and buried in text. And so a way you can work around this comes from Sarah Doody. She leads the UX portfolio formula and writes a lot of content on portfolios, does fantastic work. But one way you can think of it in her example here, imagine you took screenshots of each of the parts of your case study. And so your screenshots might look something like this, where the parts in pink are images or diagrams, and then you have these large chunks of text. This is what you want to avoid. What you want to move to is something more like a magazine feature, something like this, where you're breaking it up, you have large headlines, you're using sub-headlines, you have different sections, bullet points, numbered lists, showing instead of telling. You want to make it easy to scan, easy to consume, and see the high-level key points of your case study of your journey through the design process. So if you find yourself at level 2, my recommendation is to balance context with brevity. You need to make it concise, clear, and consumable. And when you've done that, then you'll start to approach level 3. One thing I want to be clear about, levels 1 and 2 actually aren't that common, which is a good thing. Most designers aren't doing that, but I do see it occasionally come up. The reality, though, is probably 85% of the case studies I look at fall in level 3. And I classify level 3 as the recipe book. So why do I call this the recipe book? Well, similar to a recipe book, when you open it up, there's several different recipes in there. And each recipe usually starts with a compelling image. It shows the end result of what's going to be baked. And then you have kind of a generic title, a short description, and then the recipe walks people through step by step how they produce that final result. And in the baking world, the steps might be saute the onions and carrots, and then add cinnamon, and then preheat the oven. In the world of design, those steps typically look something like this, where there's the context, the challenge, and then it goes into a typical design thinking process. There's the research section, the ideation section, the design section, prototyping, testing, or those steps might be more output focused. So there's a headline that says user interviews, and then a headline for personas, and then sketches and wireframes and mock-ups. And I want to be super clear. I'm not saying these are bad things. Like, this is the typical and standard design process or outputs a designer might create. But when this translates into a case study and these are your headlines, the problem is if 85% of case studies fall in this category, then they're going to all look and read and sound the same. And if your case study looks identical to every other case study, it's going to be really hard to stand out and give the hiring manager or recruiter a compelling reason why they should choose you out of the hundreds of other candidates. And essentially, it starts to become like this cookie cutter template where everyone looks identical and we're all producing the same factory assembly line. And that's where these articles come from that I shared at the beginning, of people saying this formula has expired, it's getting repetitive, it feels like a case study factory where every designer is producing the same thing. So how do we break out of this? How do we move to the next level? That's where my recommendation is focus less on the process and instead embrace storytelling. You want to make this engaging and show the why, not just the what. Be authentic, reveal the plot twists where the things didn't go right in your story, and let your personality shine through your writing and share your unique journey. Now, this is easier said than done. We're going to talk about level 4, which I call the storyteller. And I want to share with you my secret. And after this, it's not going to be much of a secret because I'm going to reveal it. And I see designers already doing this. These are the designers at levels 4 and 5. But here's our typical level 3 outline for a case study. It's either focused on the process or the output. It's very generic. And I'm pretty sure every designer has written a case study that reads and sounds like this. Even early in my career, I did this exact same thing. But if you want to become a storyteller, well, we're going to start from a blank slate. For a moment, let's just reframe our mentality and go back to the basics. So we have our context and background or challenge and problem statement. For simplicity, I'm just going to merge those together and call them our setting and our conflict. And now, what comes after the conflict? Well, instead of just focusing solely on the process or outputs, instead, we're going to embrace our inner storyteller. We're going to have a beginning, middle, and end where we have this conflict, and that conflict leads us to the rising action. Now, we're the hero in this journey, and we're going to share how we encountered this conflict and the action we took to navigate it and deal with it. And this rising action is going to reach a climax, kind of the pivotal moment in the story that's going to wow our audience and really get their attention. And then after the climax, we're going to have the falling action and the resolution, kind of show what happened afterward and what our takeaways were. And then every good story should inspire to action, which is why at the very end, we're going to have a call to action. We don't just want people to read our case study and story, but we want to inspire them to take action, like extending an interview. And then as a cherry on top, we're going to add a catchy hook, basically an attention grabber to draw our reader in to read this story. Now, I know what you're all thinking. This might feel kind of high level and vague, and every designer desperately wants to see an example of this in action. And so I'm going to share that with you right now. Let's see this in action, a sample level 4 case study following this framework. So right here, I have my portfolio website. And like many portfolio websites, there's a list of case studies. And I'm going to zoom in on one of these case studies right here. So this tile right here is my catchy hook. This is my attention grabber. This is what draws my audience in to click on the case study. A few key things that I'm doing here is I have an attractive image showing the final result, where people can see this is what was produced in this story. And then I have a catchy title, something to really draw the reader's attention. In this case, it was a very unique story going from 0 to a 1.2 billion valuation. Now that is a very dramatic story. Most case studies might be something simpler, but we still want it to be something engaging, like increasing user engagement by 27%, or publishing an app in the App Store that ranks somewhere, just something that really draws their attention. I could have very easily made this title something generic, like redesigning the Simple Nexus mobile app. But the chances are my audience doesn't know who Simple Nexus is. Most of you on this call probably don't know who Simple Nexus is either, so that's not going to draw their attention in. I could have also said something like designing a mobile app for the mortgage industry. And if my target audience is in the mortgage industry, that's great. But if as a designer, I'm not targeting any specific industry, but I'm willing to just work in any industry, you might be looking instead for just the personality of the company, then you probably don't need to mention the industry as part of your title. Instead, make it something compelling that applies to your audience, that excites them. And then below that, I have a subtitle that gives a little more context. In this case, it was creating a vision and a strategy and a design system. Or for you, it might be doing research and how that led to a solution, or designing a web app or whatever it is. But those are just some ingredients for a catchy hook. Now, if we go ahead and click on this, once again, kind of have an attractive image at the top showing the end, repeating that title and subtitle. But then right here, I have a summary. Basically, I'm making the assumption that this hiring manager or recruiter is only going to spend 30 seconds on this case study. Now, if I can grab their attention in those 30 seconds, then they might actually read it and spend 3 to 5 minutes going through the story. So in this summary, I'm basically identifying the context, I'm sharing what I did, and then I'm revealing the end result. I'm not making the recruiter or hiring manager scroll all the way to the bottom to see the end result. Instead, I put it right here in the summary. I put it right here in the title. I've shown it right here with these images. I'm just leading with the end because that's what's going to be compelling and draw them in. Now, if we scroll further in this case study, you'll notice instead of a generic headline like the context or background, instead I'm being more descriptive. I'm describing the context here, how it was started from humble beginnings. And you'll notice even my lead sentence, I'm starting with the word imagine, because I'm trying to take my reader and I want them to see this journey from my perspective. I want them to imagine they're in my shoes. When I get further down, this is where I reveal the conflict. I'm making it large, I'm making it stand out so they can clearly see here's the conflict in my story. Now, if I scroll down further, we start to get to the rising action. Once again, when you look at these titles, they're not the generic research and ideation and design. Even though I did follow that process, I did research, I did ideation, I did design. But with my case study, I'm instead focusing on the story. The content will reveal the process, but I'm really trying to share what was unique about my situation. And I'm explaining the why, not just the what, but why I made these decisions, why I did what I did. I'm also sharing my emotions. This was my reaction at one point in this journey, and I'm communicating that when I was shocked what an audit we did revealed with all of these hideous buttons. And then I'm revealing the reactions of my coworkers and users, how there were audible gasps. I'm really just focusing on these storytelling elements to really make this shine. Now, as we continue through this rising action, we start to approach the climax. Often in a case study, the climax is going to be the final solution. In this case, I'm showing here's what the project or what we inherited looked like before, and then here's the after. Here's what we achieved when we produced this beautiful, user-friendly, backed by research design. And of course, I want context. I want to make sure my reader can understand what's going on in these images. But actually, in my story, the climax isn't just the solution. The climax is actually when I share the solution with the rest of my company. And these are actual quotes and reactions from my coworkers. And this is the climax, the strong, powerful moment of emotion and excitement. And you'll notice instead of just taking all these quotes and maybe putting them in small text and bullet points, I'm instead really illustrating the impact of this climax. I'm taking a full page on the web browser to really express this moment and visually demonstrate it. And now that we've reached the climax, well, then we start getting into the resolution. And this is where I continue with my journey and my process. I'm showing the why behind my decision making and ultimately the results it achieved. But then at the very end of my case study, I'm ending with the call to action. I'm inviting my reader, hey, are you interested in learning more? Here's how you can connect with me. Here's how you can contact me. And if you're actively looking for a job, then you can be even more straightforward, such as, hey, do you want to hear the full version? Like, let's schedule an interview. Let's schedule a one-on-one call. Because I only shared with you the 3 to 5 minute version of this story. But if you want the full version, then let's do it over an interview where I can give you the full story and presentation. And so that right there is an example of storytelling in action. We're focusing on the why, we're making it engaging, we're being authentic, we're letting our personality shine through. We're focusing less on the process and outputs and more on the story and decision making and the unique journey that we go through. And that's what it looks like, an example of having a catchy hook, establishing the setting and conflict, showing the rising action, leading to a climax, having a resolution, and ending with a call to action. Once again, that was just an example. That's not the only way to do it, because at the end of the day, we want to tell our own unique story and share our unique experience, even if it was a standard design process with research, ideation, design, prototyping, testing. Another really great analogy is to think of this like a movie trailer. Movie trailers are very short. They're typically 30 to 60 seconds. And the goal of a trailer isn't to show the 2-hour movie. Rather, in less than 2 minutes, we're trying to convince our audience to go see the full movie. Or in our scenario, we're trying to convince them of, hey, let's schedule a one-on-one call or interview where I can share with you the full version of this journey, of this process, and share with you why I'm the best fit for this open role. So now, at this point, that's a lot. And you might be wondering, how could we possibly go higher? What is level 5? Well, level 5 is basically acknowledging that we're not just here to share a fun and engaging story, but we're here to sell ourselves as the best candidate for an open role. And one of the best ways to do that is by showing the business impact. Basically, we're taking storytelling, but then we're applying it with the mentality of this is a business case. I'm negotiating why I'm the best fit for this role, why I have the skills and experience, what I have achieved with those skills and experience, and how that's impacted other companies or other projects, and how I can do that at your company. And that's level 5, the business case. If we went back to my story, I was skimming a lot there. I was kind of scrolling through. We weren't actually reading the whole thing, but you'll notice I have a lot of sections explaining how is this impacting the business. For example, how is the conflict, the fact that we had a poor user experience, how was that impacting the business? How was that impacting other departments? How was that increasing support calls or hurting sales or making our development team slower or losing users? Really went to the level of calculating this. And then at the end of my case study, I had the results. Here's what we achieved when we fixed the problem. Here's things that we were measuring and tracking and how design was contributing to the business value. You'll also notice that I had it in my title. It was very much a business value statement. And I also repeated it again in my summary of here's the value that we were able to help contribute to and deliver. Now, how do I quantify the impact? This is a very big question, and we don't have time to go through this. It's really challenging. Most designers aren't equipped with this skill set. It's something they learn over time. In addition, most companies aren't very good at this either. So it requires designers to change the company culture to focus on outcomes over output. If I was to summarize it in 30 seconds, though, it's basically this. Before starting a project, define the goals and what success looks like. Or if you're inheriting a project, if a product manager or sales rep or stakeholder is saying, we need you to design this, then that's a great opportunity to say, awesome, Can you help me understand what the goals are and how we're going to measure success or know if we're successful? And then just as important is identifying how are we going to measure that? What tools or methods are we going to use to measure whether or not this is successful? And that's essentially level 5. We're taking that storytelling and we're including the business impact. This, once again, is very challenging to do in a lot of scenarios. There are creative ways around it, though, but not all designers are able to reach level 5 with every case study. But that is okay. The levels 4 through 5 are the range we want to be at. So, just kind of a high-level recap. Basically, I shared with you the 5 levels of case studies. Level 1 was the art gallery, where we're showing the output, but we're not providing context. Level 2 is the academic report, where we have too much context to the point where a hiring manager or recruiter can't even consume it or read it to understand what you did. Level 3 is where most designers are actually at. This is where you have kind of your cookie cutter case study where it's showing your process, showing your outputs, and it's not bad. You can still get hired at level 3, but it typically won't stand out as much. And so if we really want to stand out, we want to introduce those storytelling, the dynamics and frameworks and mentality to really show the why and make the story unique. And then the very top level is the business case, where we're not only storytelling, but we're actually showing the business value of design and how our project made a difference in the world. And that's what I came to share today. That's my 5 levels of case studies framework. This is based on observations and trends I've seen in the industry of what really sets apart a case study. Why is it that the people at levels 4 and 5 are typically getting the job interviews, and how a designer can level up and get there? So that's what I come to share today. And I'm super excited and looking forward to hearing your questions.
Thank you so much, Mitchell. That was really insightful. I think the audience has really enjoyed it, looking at the chat panel anyway. And in particular for me, I thought what was great was how you really let your personality shine in that storyteller case study format with the emojis and how you reacted to seeing all those different buttons. I think that's really, really clever and a great way to stand out and for potential employers to understand who you are as a person rather than just reading text.
Yeah, absolutely.
So there's been lots of questions coming in and people have been upvoting their favorite ones. So that's where I'm going to start with the most popular questions.
Awesome.
So the first one is, this is great, but for those of us coming out of boot camps with fictitious case studies, how do we storytell without real world metrics?
Yeah, that is a fantastic question. So typically, if it is a fictitious project, it will be harder to reach that level 5 with actual metrics if it wasn't actually built. That being said, there are ways around this. My biggest recommendation is, well, first off, try to make it as realistic as possible. Try to make sure the project or problem you're choosing isn't just a made-up problem, but is actually a real-world problem with real-world users that have that frustration or conflict. And then really just, try to express your journey and your emotions of navigating, trying to solve this problem. Really help the reader empathize with the pain your users are feeling. That's a really strong emotion. And even if it's, not going to be implemented, you can still get metrics from user testing. You can measure how many users were able to successfully complete tasks. Or you can ask user sentiment, like on a scale of 1 to 5, how did users rate the existing solution and the new solution? Or how painful was their pain point? And then how well does your solution solve that pain point? There are ways to still storytell and quantify the impact of your work, even if it is fictitious and not for a real company or a real product that gets built.
Great. Thank you. I think this one is quite similar, so you can let us know if your answer is the same. But for junior designers or people with projects that have very little data yet, how might you showcase value or outcomes?
Yeah, that's a great question. And that's once again why I kind of added that disclaimer of a lot of times we're not able to reach level 5 with every case study. And when I started out my career, most of my case studies were kind of that level 3 range. But then I was focusing on, well, how can I share my unique story and focus on the why instead of the what? And that can help you get to level 4. But once again, there are creative ways to measure pain. For example, you might find from your users, they have to spend, figure out, like, you could quantify how much time that is costing them. Maybe they don't have a solution to help them accomplish something. So they're doing some roundabout way that takes extra minutes or even extra hours in their day or week. And you can start to quantify that of, how do they value their time? How much time is this costing them in their lives? Maybe it's not dollars, but you can measure time. You can measure satisfaction and pain. You can measure dollars, and that's typically what businesses want to see. But there's other ways to quantify impact.
That's great. Thank you. All right, so the next question, based on your experience, how many case studies should be in a portfolio?
Yeah, that's a great question. My strongest recommendation is focus on quality over quantity, which is why for many designers, I typically recommend between 3 and 5. But honestly, I usually lean closer to 3 because you only want to show your best work. If you're showing work in your portfolio that's not your best work, and that's the case study the hiring manager clicks on, because once again, they're probably only going to look at 1 or 2. That's all they have time for. And so if those 1 or 2 case studies they actually look at don't represent your best work, then you're going to be judged on your worst work or not your best work. And so focus on quality over quantity.
Okay. And if people only have 1 quality, do you think that's sufficient?
I mean, I've seen it before. Once again, I want to add the caveat. I've seen designers get hired who don't have a portfolio or don't have case studies, or maybe they only have 1 case study. Everything I've shared is basically, if you are going to have a portfolio with case studies, which I do highly recommend, especially if you're starting out in your career, but something is better than nothing. And if you can make that 1 case study very impactful, that can sometimes be enough. Now, granted, sometimes hiring managers do want to see, like, can you do this multiple times? Can you reproduce the success, not just once, but multiple times? But yeah, then try working to get your next case study, but still lead with the quality over quantity.
Yeah, makes sense. Great. Okay, so next one up is, since the portfolio should be the trailer of your work, during the interview, when you need to share and discuss your work in more detail, do you need to have another portfolio prepared?
That's a good question. So yeah, the only spot where that trailer analogy breaks down is, trailers usually don't reveal the spoilers or the end, but I do recommend your case study. It's the length of a trailer, but it's going to reveal the end. It's going to spoil everything, and that's okay. When it comes to your presentation, which is very common in the hiring process, it's very common to be asked to do a 30 to 45-minute presentation where you go more in depth, you share your work, they ask you some questions. And usually my recommendation is, it's okay if it's the same one that is in your portfolio. Then it gives you the opportunity to give them the full version. Your portfolio only showed the 3 to 5 minute short version, but now you can really go into depth. You can really show that full journey, and you have a captive audience. They've already given you the 45 minutes. They've already blocked it off in their calendars. And so that's your opportunity to just go in and show your best work.
Lots of prep work to do.
Yes.
But worth it, hopefully. Okay, thank you for that answer. The next one is, what platforms do you think are best for a junior UX designer to use for their portfolio? Examples are Framer, Notion, Squarespace, Webflow, etc.
Yeah, that's a great question. Honestly, my personal recommendation is do whatever platform you're the most comfortable with and doesn't get in your way of just quickly creating what you want to create. I would advise there are some platforms like Dribbble or Medium.com or others, or Behance. A problem with those platforms is it's really easy to get started, but the downside is your work is going to be side by side with other designers. If you're writing your case study on Medium, at the very end, it's going to suggest articles, and the call to action is not interview you. The call to action to the reader is check out these other stories that are trending, or check out these other dribble shots that are trending. So that is one thing you want to be aware of. I personally use Framer. I absolutely love it. They have a generous free plan. It's very similar to Figma, which is a very popular design tool. But at the end of the day, though, just use whatever platform you're most comfortable with and can help you present your best work most effectively.
Thank you. That's actually a really important note on Dribbble and sending employers away to other people's work. Good thing for people to be aware of.
I've seen it happen even as a hiring manager. I started reading someone's case study or looking at their Dribbble work, and then there's ads on there. It's showing other people's work that kind of catches my attention, and before I know it, I'm no longer on that candidate's portfolio. I'm looking at other people, which really is a risk of those platforms.
Huge risk, yeah. Lots of people are looking for examples. Is there a particular resource, maybe it's your own website, where people can go and find lots of examples of good portfolios?
Yeah, that's a great question. That's something I've been trying to curate over time. Another fantastic example, if you just Google Simon Pan, he has an outstanding portfolio. It's often shared in the design community a lot. And you'll notice he's doing the exact same things. He's using a lot of storytelling. He's showing the impact. So I highly recommend just Google Simon Pan portfolio. Very incredible designer. I shared my own, just mitchellclements.com. You can find it on LinkedIn and such. It's just another approach. I often see websites where they try to kind of like curate the best portfolios. They've been hit and miss. They're usually just trying to curate portfolios with really good visual design. And it's more of like a visual design comparison. But often they're lacking those storytelling elements and the business impact and showing the why. But I think those are some great places to start.
Great, thank you. Okay, next up, what if my company doesn't allow me to showcase the project as well as the metrics in my portfolio? And there was a couple of versions of that question that came in about NDA work as well.
This question comes up every time. And it really is a tricky challenge to navigate. A few recommendations, though, is sometimes we don't actually look into what is the actual NDA, like what can we show and can't show. We're often just kind of nervous, like, I don't want to break anything, so I'm not going to do anything. But have an open conversation, whether it's with your HR or legal department, or if you're comfortable enough with your manager, just expressing, hey, I want to represent and show the quality work that I've done here. And I want to understand what can I show and what can I not show. Another thing I've typically found is often projects are more restrictive when they're in the design process, but once they've been released, companies are usually, it's in their release notes, it's in their marketing emails, it's on the company's landing page and blog. And and now it's no longer a secret, like the solution's out there. So that really lifts a lot of restrictions. And then it's just a matter of, hey, can I, kind of reveal some of the process we use to do this, which is actually a great way to promote your company. A lot of companies actually encourage their designers to publish articles and share, here's how we do design here. One final thing I want to call out, if you go to that Simon Pan portfolio, his first case study in there is for Uber. And Uber is going to have very restricted NDA, and yet you can see how much he was still able to tell and show. And you'll even notice with the metrics, there's a little asterisk, and he says these are not the actual metrics, they're under NDA, but these were the things we measured. And he's kind of putting some placeholders in there, so he was still able to navigate that. He didn't reveal the actual metrics, but he did reveal kind of samples of, well, here's what we measured, how we measured it, and kind of some rough approximations or ranges of where that landed.
Yeah, that's a good point. And just for anyone who isn't aware, NDA is a non-disclosure agreement. It's a contract that some companies will have you sign so that you don't share information publicly, just in case anyone wasn't aware of that. Always aware of acronym usage.
Yes, that is good call out. Thank you for clarifying that.
Yeah, no worries. Okay, we'll take a couple more questions. The next one is, as a junior or entry-level UX designer, what type of projects should I be including in my portfolio to be more persuasive for hiring managers?
That's a good question. There's a few ways to approach this. Usually my top recommendation is, I see so many projects that are nearly identical. Like it feels like everybody wants to redesign Spotify or create a food delivery app, even though those solutions have been solved over and over and over. If you really want to stand out, I recommend go find and identify a problem or challenge in the real world that you feel like hasn't been solved effectively. Or if you do want to redesign a platform, for example, in one of my projects early on in my career, I wanted to redesign a part of Facebook Marketplace. Now, I didn't redesign all of Facebook. There's no way I could create a better solution than them, because they have thousands of designers with thousands of hours of research. It seemed kind of naive that some junior designer is going to say, I can be better than them. But there might be parts of their product, parts that, oh, well, this piece could be improved. And so I did that with my case study. I, showed Facebook Marketplace has this problem where people keep listing things as free, but then when you click on it, it's not free. And so I was, okay, well, how could we actually solve this like micro problem with an effective solution that would actually work and live inside that ecosystem? Another great way is just connecting with friends or small local businesses or nonprofits. They all have problems and they probably don't have designers. And so there's a lot of just opportunities to, hey, this doesn't even have to be fictitious. Like, I'm going to actually go help them solve this problem or design a solution. And they might even implement it if they have the resources. So there's so many opportunities. Try choosing something you're passionate about, because that passion will shine through in your case study. And if possible, try to make it realistic. Don't make up a problem, but actually identify a real problem that you feel like hasn't been solved effectively.
That's really helpful, I think, for a lot of the people on the call here who just don't have a lot of experience of real life case studies. So that's really helpful.
Yeah.
This is a really interesting question. So the question is, I've heard from hiring managers that they like to easily find what they want to find. So using an established pattern can have its benefits versus disrupting it with new recipes. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's a fun question. Yeah, most portfolios do follow the same pattern where they're typically a website. You see a headline, subtext, and then a list of case studies. You'll notice that's actually how I did my website. Like, I didn't try and reinvent the wheel. And I recommend that to most designers because it is a safe pattern, it's user friendly, it matches your users' expectations. Typically, when I say be unique, I'm more so referring make the content of your case studies compelling and unique. That being said, I do see some designers who try to get really bold. They, have very flashy animation and motion and, just create these. In some cases, they're very beautiful websites and they pull it off and it does help them stand out. Most of the time, though, it does fall flat. And as a hiring manager, like, I can't even figure out how to navigate this website or how to see your work. And especially, like, they're often not mobile friendly. So if someone messages me on LinkedIn and they say, here's my case study, and like, okay, yeah, I'm on my phone, I'll look at it. Those fancy websites almost are never optimized for mobile, which can hurt you. So my recommendation is stick with the standard patterns. If you are going to intentionally break away from them, it's a very risky decision. It can work in your favor, but most of the times it does not. And you spend so much time trying to create some crazy animation and interaction when all the hiring manager really just wants to see is, can you do the product design process? Do you understand core principles of usability and design and research and that? So proceed at your own risk, but I don't recommend it.
Okay, thank you. All right, I'm going to ask one final question and then we're going to wrap up. Cool. So what is the biggest mistake or the most common mistake that you see in people's portfolios that you want everyone on this call to walk away and not make?
Oh man, that's hard to just identify a single one. But I think once again, I kind of expressed it in how, 85% of case studies fall in that level 3 category, where they're just very focused on the process, the output, and the what. But they're completely missing the why, your personality, your journey. And it's the most common, it's hard to call a mistake because I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but it could be so much better if you took a storytelling mindset. It can really help you stand apart. Now, you don't need to re-innovate your design process or the layout of your case study, but be willing to be unique and creative when it comes to how you express and communicate your story instead of making it read like a recipe book. Really is just one of the most actionable things you can do to kind of level up and stand out.
Love that. Well, thank you so much, Mitchell. This was really insightful. I'm going to just wrap us up with a couple of announcements first. So 1 second, I'm just going to share something here. Okay. So before we wrap up and do our goodbyes and our thank yous, I wanted to share 2 announcements from the UX Design Institute. The first one is that our most popular course, the Professional Diploma in UX Design, currently has early bird pricing in place. So for any of you on the call who has not yet taken this course or are interested in it, now is a great time to reach out and take advantage of that early bird pricing discount. It's up to 30% and it can be split over 9 months with a 0% interest. And even more exciting, we just launched a brand new course that we are very, very proud of. It is the Professional Certificate in User Research. And for our next cohort starting on the 4th of December, we also have early bird pricing in place. So if anybody is interested in studying with us here at the UX Design Institute, there will be links to those courses in the chat box where you can learn more. So with that, I want to say a very big thank you to Mitchell for spending your time with us here and sharing all of your insights. We very much appreciate it. I think everyone on the call took a lot of great learnings from you today. And also a big thank you to everyone who showed up and listened in and sent in your questions. There was great engagement. We hope to see you on future webinars. We run these every month. So do head over to our website, subscribe to our blog. We'll make sure to send you updates of upcoming events. So that's everything. Thank you so much, everybody, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you. It was great to talk with all of you.
Bye-bye.